Life had its own way of being unremarkable for me. My name's Rita, and at 29, you'd find me tucked away in the local library. It wasn't glamorous or thrilling, but it was mine. The books were my companions, and the dusty shelves, my domain. I wasn't one for the spotlight, happy to fade into the background. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your business before you did. My daily routine rarely varied: wake up, work, and then home to my tiny apartment filled with secondhand furniture and a mountain of books. My social life was non-existent, and I was fine with that. Or so I kept telling myself. Ethan came into my life on a day much like any other. He was looking for a book, something different, he said. His smile was easy, and his voice had a warmth to it that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Hey, could you help me find a book?" "I'm feeling adventurous," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sure, what genre are you interested in?" I asked, adjusting my glasses, trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. "I don't know, surprise me," he replied with a grin that suggested he enjoyed the mundane challenge he'd set before me. And that was the beginning of everything. Our conversations became a regular part of my days. He'd ask about books, and I'd recommend titles. But soon, those conversations shifted from the pages of novels to the details of our lives. Ethan was different. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel heard for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. "You know, Rita, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day?" he asked, leaning on the counter, a playful challenge in his eyes. I laughed, a sound that felt strange even to my own ears. "Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly bursting with excitement." Ethan's response was quick. "Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight?" "My treat." "You can show me this hidden gem of a town," he coaxed, his confidence infectious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. "Okay, sure, but no fancy places." "I don't do well with all that pomp and deal," I said, feeling a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement, all because of Ethan's smile lighting up the room. "I'll pick you up at 7. That simple statement from Ethan seemed to carry a weight of anticipation that hung in the air between us. I spent hours debating what to wear, trying on different outfits, each one feeling inadequate in some way. In the end, I settled for something comfortable, a simple blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance between modesty and dignity. That night changed everything. Ethan showed me parts of the town I'd never seen, despite having lived here my whole life. He made me laugh a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't known I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me, a seriousness in his eyes. "Rita, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're genuine, and in a world full of fakes, that's rare." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. "Ethan, He cut me off gently, placing a finger on my lips. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Rita. I see the person you are, and I like what I see." Ethan had always been the sweet spot in my day, making everything seem brighter with his care and affection. He had this way of making me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart, things I hardly believed about myself. It was his warmth that won me over, making the idea of forever seem not just possible but desirable. When he popped the question, it felt like a dream. "Marry me, Rita." "I can't imagine my life without you," he said, his eyes shining with sincerity. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I breathed out, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. But before we could get lost in the whirlwind of wedding planning, there was one crucial step we had to take: meeting his parents. Ethan had given me a heads up, a sort of pre-warning. "My folks, they have a bit of a high standard for who I bring home. But don't sweat it, okay? They're going to love you once they see how amazing you are," he assured me, though his reassurance did little to ease my nerves. I was a wreck before the meeting, rummaging through my wardrobe for something that screamed modest yet dignified. It felt like an impossible dress code to crack. Ethan, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, almost disinterested, as if the outcome of this meeting didn't weigh on him at all. "You're overthinking it, Rita. Just wear what you're comfortable in," he said casually, which only frayed my nerves further. As we drove to his parents' house, Ethan seemed more preoccupied with the music on the radio than the impending introduction. "You sure they're going to like me?" I asked, the anxiety creeping into my voice, despite my best efforts to remain composed. I asked, seeking some reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself," Ethan replied, his attention briefly flitting to me before returning to the road. His laid-back attitude felt jarring compared to the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. Walking up to the door of Ethan's childhood home, my heart was pounding. His earlier warnings echoed in my head, painting a picture of the scrutiny I was about to face. The door swung open, and we were greeted by Ethan's parents, their expressions hard to read. The dinner that followed was a minefield. Ethan's parents grilled me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than casual dinner conversation. "So, Rita, Ethan tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he found my job lacking. I fumbled for an answer, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my passion would be enough to win them over. Ethan was strangely quiet throughout, offering little support as I navigated the barrage of questions and veiled criticisms. It felt like I was alone on the battlefield, with Ethan retreating into a role of passive observer. As we drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. I couldn't help but feel disappointed, not just in the evening's events, but in Ethan's indifference. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me," I finally broke the silence, my voice tinged with hurt. Ethan shrugged, a frustratingly nonchalant gesture. "Give it time, Rita. They just need to get to know you better," he said, his words doing little to comfort me. After a few more dinners that felt more like interrogations than friendly meals, it was clear Ethan's folks weren't my biggest fans. They saw me as some kind of gold digger, I guess, which couldn't be further from the truth. I was never after Ethan's money. Heck, I barely knew about it until he brought it up himself one evening, saying, "My parents are a bit old school, you know? They worry about the weirdest things, like money and status." One night, Ethan came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew something was up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my stomach tie up in knots. "It's my parents," he started, finally looking at me. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." The word felt foreign, bitter on my tongue. "Ethan, you know I don't care about your money, right?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know, and I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us or whatever." I was hurt, not going to lie. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But I loved Ethan more than I cared about his parents' approval or some stupid agreement. "Fine," I said, more sharply than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money, whatever. I don't care, I just want you." Ethan looked relieved, and a part of me hated that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So we signed the damn thing. Some lawyer his parents knew drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's stuff if things went south. It felt like signing a declaration of distrust before we even started, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was nothing grand, just the way I wanted it. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and the promise of forever. I moved into Ethan's place shortly after. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, but it felt miles away from my old apartment. Ethan's parents lived nearby, which I soon found out meant surprise visits that were more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Ethan started off like something out of a fairy tale, but it wasn't long before the gloss started to fade, revealing the grim reality beneath. The shift wasn't overnight, but the signs were there, creeping in slowly, eroding what we had built. His mother, Linda, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She dropped by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Ethan's house. Everything here is his." I tried to keep my cool, replying, "I'm well aware, Linda. I'm not here for your son's things. I love him." She scoffed, "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with, nothing." One day, she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knickknack that Ethan owned. "See this couch? Ethan's. That painting? Also Ethan's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it," she said, her voice laced with venomous sweetness. It was as if she relished reminding me of my place in their world. Ethan's father, George, wasn't any better. He and Linda acted like they owned our house, not just visiting. They demanded coffee the moment they walked in, critiqued how I made it, too weak or too strong, then sat in front of the TV, expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. "Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it," George would say, not even bothering to look at me. The worst part? Ethan never said a word against it. He'd laugh along, adding his own jabs. "Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time." I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone cruel and dismissive. "Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this?" I'd confront Ethan after his parents left. "Babe, they're just set in their ways, you know how old people are," he'd shrug it off, making it sound like I was the one overreacting. "They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right?" That line hit me like a slap in the face. So, that was it. I was just the freeloader, the girl who married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them, just another reason to look down on me. The days blurred into each other, each one a repetition of the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work shelving books when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, doubling me over. It wasn't just stress, it was something more, something worse. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but think how this was a new low, alone in pain and not a single message or call from Ethan. Just when I thought things couldn't get any darker, a knock on the door heralded a visitor I never expected. "Rita Turner?" The man at the door was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase, looking wildly out of place in the sterile hospital room. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" My voice was weak, tired from the pain and the endless cycle of disappointment. "I'm Michael Johnson, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you." His tone was formal, but there was something in his eyes that made me want to listen. I motioned for him to continue, curious yet perplexed. Despite the situation, my curiosity piqued. "It's about your great-uncle, Edward Turner. He passed away recently, and, well, you're his sole heir, Rita. He left you an inheritance." The words didn't make sense at first. "Are you sure you've got the right person?" "I haven't seen him for 15 years, I questioned. Michael nodded. "Quite sure. He was a private man, but always remembered you, wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Lying in the hospital bed, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation, I watched as the notary prepared to delve into the specifics of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents in front of him. "Rita, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite the inheritance. We're not just talking about cash here, though there's plenty of that, $20 million to be exact, Michael began, his voice steady and matter of fact. I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around the numbers. $20 million? I echoed, feeling my voice crack. That's right, he continued, unfazed by my shock. But there's more. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies. These are not minor investments, we're talking significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms out there. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he was saying. Owning parts of companies I'd only heard about on the news seemed like a fantasy. And there's the property, Michael went on, flipping through the papers. An old, large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, Rita, it's a mansion with history, acres of land, and it's all yours now. I tried to imagine the house, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Don't forget about the antique car, he added with a slight smile, as if anticipating my reaction. A classic, fully restored and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I chuckled, the situation bordering on surreal. An antique car too? What am I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Michael's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then. And then there's the furniture and paintings inside the house, genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as I tried to digest everything he was saying. So much had changed in an instant. I've inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture. That's unbelievable, I uttered, feeling the weight of the revelation sinking in. It's all yours, Rita. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. It seems he saw something special in you. Special? I felt anything but, especially lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet here I was, a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I didn't know existed. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, he assured me. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed, Ethan's name flashing on the screen for the first time in days. Ignoring it, I turned back to Michael. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Rita. Change it did. After the unexpected windfall landed in my lap, Ethan and his folks turned a new leaf, or so it seemed. Their daily hospital visits were like scenes from a sappy movie. Ethan, who couldn't be bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned furrow on his brow. How are you feeling today, love? He'd ask, his voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Linda, was even more theatrical, if possible. Darling, I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get back home. Just you wait, she said, her smile wide but not quite reaching her eyes. It was all too much, too sudden, yet I played along, smiling weakly, thanking them for their care. But suspicion nagged at me, urging me to look beyond their acts. So, one day, I did just that. After their routine visit, I mustered the strength to slip out of my bed and follow them. My heart pounded with every step as I hid behind a corner, listening in as their true selves unfolded. Their laughter was the first thing I heard, harsh and jarring. Can you believe how easy it is? She's terribly stupid, she's eating right out of our hands, Ethan said, a chuckle escaping his lips. Linda was more calculating, her voice sharp as she laid out their plan. Make sure she makes a baby with you, Ethan. Once she does, she won't ever be able to leave us. Then we'll have a real hold on her and her fortune. Their words were cruel and cold, but they didn't shock me. Disappointment filled me, yes, but surprise? Not in the slightest. They showed their true colors, and I was done painting over them in shades of denial. Silently, I made my way back to my hospital bed, their mocking words fueling a fire within me. They saw me as nothing more than a ticket to wealth, a means to secure their future. But I wasn't going to play their game, not anymore. Lying in that bed, a plan began to take shape, clear and firm. I was going to turn the tables on Ethan and his conniving family. They underestimated me, saw me as weak, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. Back at the house after being discharged, I felt like a stranger walking into what was supposed to be my home. Ethan and his parents were there, waiting, their faces painted with fake concern and eagerness. The atmosphere was thick, charged with unspoken tension and expectation. Ethan was the first to break the silence, his voice a blend of faint sweetness and underlying greed. "Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you," he said, ignoring the lump in my throat. I met his gaze squarely, seeing the man I once thought I knew. "I'm feeling better, thanks. But we need to talk, all of us," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Linda, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Of course, dear. We're here for you, whatever you need." It was now or never. I took a deep breath and laid out my cards. "I'm filing for divorce, Ethan, and before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance." The room fell silent, the air sucked out of it as if by a vacuum. Ethan's face paled, his mask slipping to reveal the panic underneath. "Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy," he stammered, struggling to find the words. "Happy?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You, your mom, and your dad have made my life a living hell. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife, and now suddenly you're worried about me because I'm worth something to you?" But Linda, always quick, jumped in. "This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear." Rolling my eyes, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of him. This is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the naive girl you took me for." George, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and defeat. "You'll regret this. We're your family." "No, you were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turn sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here." Moving into my own place was the breath of fresh air I desperately needed. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. It wasn't just a new living space, it was my declaration of independence, my fresh start. The phone call started almost immediately. Ethan, with his voice dripping with desperation, was the first to break the silence. "Rita, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out, I know we can," he pleaded, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging could change that. "Ethan, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Not long after, Linda chimed in, her tone a toxic mix of anger and guilt-tripping. "Ungrateful after everything we've done for you. You owe us, Rita." "You're making a huge mistake," she insisted. "Owe you for what, Linda? For making me feel like nothing more than a burden?" "No, I don't owe you anything. Goodbye," I said, hanging up on her. It felt like shedding a heavy weight, a final cut from the ties that bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Ethan and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very document they had insisted on, the prenuptial agreement, was now the source of their family strife. With my great-uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found purpose and generosity. A significant portion went to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a difference in the world. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, fraught with challenges and hard choices, but standing in my bookstore surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Ethan and his family's manipulation, it was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings, I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise of newfound happiness. I'll start from the point where my parents appeared and began banging on the car window. It was such a sudden and unexpected intrusion. I could feel the tension rising as my dad's voice filled the air, questioning me if someone had asked me to do something. My mom, as always, chimed in, urging me to just be quiet and persuade Steve. But what were they persuading Steve about? It didn't take long for me to piece it together. They were in cahoots with my in-laws, plotting against Ed, my husband. Steve, the chairman, was favoring his own father for the position, and they were scheming to remove Ed from his rightful place in the company. Then, amidst the chaos, I noticed something in my mother's hand, a crowbar. Before I could even comprehend what was happening, she swung it high, and with a deafening crash, the car window shattered. I was stunned, frozen in disbelief at the violence unfolding before me. And then came the news about Steve's car. They said it had fallen off a cliff, accompanied by a suicide note. But a week later, an envelope arrived, scheduled for that very day. Inside was a letter and a key. Steve's voice echoed through the words he had penned, urging me to read it without letting my parents find out. It was a premeditated message, a contingency plan in case something happened to him. He wanted me to take what was stored in a locker and run to his uncle's place immediately. With Lucy, my sister-in-law, by my side, we wasted no time. We grabbed what we needed and fled to Uncle Ronald's house, seeking refuge and justice. And so, here I am, Hannah McKinley, 34 years old, thrust into a world of betrayal and deceit. Once just a typical housewife, now a widow with 2 children, grappling with the unimaginable loss of my husband. But I refused to accept the official narrative. Steve had no reason to end his own life. We had dreams, plans for the future. Our love was strong, our bond unbreakable. We met at the resort hotel where we both worked, drawn together by our shared passion for hospitality and tourism. It was a place of dreams, where I had always longed to work since childhood. Despite the challenges and rigorous training, I persevered, guided by a senior employee who saw potential in me. But now, as I sit here, haunted by unanswered questions and grieving for the life we once had, I am determined to uncover the truth. To protect myself and my children, to honor Steve's memory, and to expose the sinister plot that led to his untimely demise. Uncle, Steve's parents weren't exactly shining examples of competence or integrity. They held positions within the McKinley Real Estate Group, but Steve had made it clear that it was more of a formality than anything else. He had even referred to them as scum for their lack of initiative and their tendency to rely on others. As I grappled with the shock of Steve's death, my in-laws wasted no time in reaching out, their calls dripping with insensitivity. "Hannah, Steve is in a real mess now, isn't he?" they said, as if his death was just another inconvenience. Their offer of support came with thinly veiled jabs at my financial future, insinuating that without Steve, I'd be left in dire straits. But I couldn't entertain their suggestions, not after everything that had transpired. I couldn't forget how they had treated us during our marriage, barely acknowledging our existence except for formalities. Steve had deliberately kept his distance from them, seeing through their facade of familial concern. It was clear that my in-laws had their own agenda, and it didn't involve genuine concern for my well-being. Their sudden interest in my future seemed more like an attempt to exert control, to swoop in and take advantage of the chaos left in Steve's wake. But I refused to let them dictate my path. Despite the overwhelming grief and uncertainty, I knew I had to stand firm. I couldn't allow myself to be manipulated or coerced by their false promises and veiled threats. So, with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I pushed back against their intrusion, clinging to the memories of the man I loved and the life we had built together. And as I faced the daunting road ahead, I vowed to honor Steve's legacy, to seek justice for his untimely death, and to protect our children from the webs of deceit that threatened to ensnare us all. The dynamics within Steve's family were complex, to say the least. His parents held nominal positions within the McKinley Real Estate Group, a move orchestrated to keep them from causing any further setbacks. They were essentially kept on a tight leash, sent on meaningless trips under the guise of inspections, just to prevent them from meddling where they shouldn't. Steve had often laughed off the idea of joining them on these trips, preferring to stay home with me and Lucy, his sister. Speaking of Lucy, she was quite different from her parents. She had married a man with no ties to the family business and lived a life separate from the corporate drama. Lucy and her husband, Harvey, shared an unusual closeness with Steve, a bond that was evident whenever Harvey visited. Their relationship was something of a mystery, but Lucy seemed content with it, brushing off any concerns about their parents' antics. As for me, my relationship with my own parents was strained, to say the least. While things seemed fine when I was a child, the cracks began to show when I reached college. Out of nowhere, they demanded that I drop out and return home because of a marriage proposal from a local dignitary's son. It was a jarring revelation, shattering the image I had of my parents as loving and supportive. Suddenly, I realized that they saw me as nothing more than a bargaining chip, a means to their own ends. But I refused to be controlled, even if it meant facing financial hardship. I sought advice from my professors and scraped by on scholarships, determined to pursue my education on my own terms. The parallels between our family situations were uncanny. Both Steve and I had been caught in the web of familial expectations, forced to navigate a world where love and support came with strings attached. But as we faced the challenges together, we found strength in each other, forging a bond that was unbreakable, even in the face of tragedy. Life after college was a whirlwind of uncertainty and hard work. I hustled through part-time jobs, scraping by on minimal wages, all while trying to secure a stable future. It was during this time that I met Steve, a beacon of stability amidst the chaos of my life. Our relationship blossomed, leading to marriage, and despite my initial reservations, even my parents seemed oddly pleased with the match. But as we settled into married life and started a family, the cracks in our respective family dynamics became more apparent. Steve and I both sensed a certain level of expectation from our parents, an unspoken assumption that we would provide for them in their old age. Their seemingly innocent remarks about our children being a ticket to an easier life grated on us, reminding us of the burdens we carried from our pasts. Despite our misgivings, we pressed on, raising our children with love and determination. Steve's career flourished, providing us with the means to afford help around the house. But just when things seemed to be looking up, tragedy struck the McKinley Real Estate Group. The chairman's sudden illness sent shockwaves through the company, throwing its future into uncertainty. With no designated successor in place, the question of leadership loomed large. And amidst the chaos, Steve found himself thrust into the spotlight, nominated as a potential heir to the chairman's throne. It was a position neither of us had anticipated, and one that came with its own set of challenges and dangers. As Steve grappled with the weight of this unexpected responsibility, I couldn't help but worry about the implications for our family. Would this newfound power only serve to further entangle us in the web of corporate intrigue? Or would it offer us a chance to break free from the shadows of our pasts and forge a brighter future for ourselves and our children? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, we were in this together, bound by love, loyalty, and the shared determination to carve out our own path, no matter the obstacles that lay ahead. The tension within the McKinley Real Estate Group reached a boiling point as Steve's nomination as the chairman's successor was met with resistance from certain quarters. While most senior staff saw it as a reasonable choice given Steve's training and education within the company, there were those who couldn't accept it, namely, Steve's own parents. Their resentment bubbled to the surface during a confrontation with the chairman, where they voiced their objections, demanding that Steve step down in favor of themselves. What started as a plea gradually morphed into a thinly veiled threat, leaving Steve and me on edge. As we grappled with the gravity of the situation, it became clear that Steve's parents were willing to go to extreme lengths to assert their dominance within the company. Their hostility toward us escalated, and we realized that we needed to take proactive measures to protect ourselves and our children. Drawing on Steve's resources and my own ingenuity, we devised a plan to ensure our safety. We enlisted the help of the building manager to prevent any suspicious individuals from entering our home, while Steve arranged for a discreet security detail to accompany us whenever we ventured outside. Despite our precautions, the threat remained ever present. One day, while we were enjoying a leisurely outing at the park, disaster struck. In a terrifying moment, a stranger attempted to snatch my daughter away, her intentions unmistakably sinister. But before she could succeed, a vigilant security guard intervened, thwarting her nefarious plan and safeguarding my child from harm. It was a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows, of the lengths to which our adversaries would go to assert their control. But it also galvanized our resolve, strengthening our determination to stand firm in the face of adversity and protect the ones we loved at all costs. The attempted kidnapping at the park left us shaken and on edge, reminding us of the dangers lurking in the world around us. We resolved to be even more vigilant, not just against kidnappings, but against any potential threats that might endanger our family's safety. However, amidst our heightened awareness, I overlooked one crucial detail: the looming threat posed by my own parents. The encounter in the apartment parking lot was a chilling wake-up call, a stark reminder that danger could come from unexpected quarters. As my parents aggressively demanded that I persuade Steve to decline the chairman position in favor of his own father, their true intentions became clear. They were willing to resort to violence to achieve their goals, brandishing a crowbar and shattering the car window in a terrifying display of force. In that moment of chaos, with shards of glass littering the car and my children crying out in fear, I felt a surge of panic. But I remained determined to protect my family, signaling for the security guards and ensuring our safe escape from the situation. As we retreated to the safety of our apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. My own parents, once trusted figures in my life, had revealed themselves to be willing accomplices in a dangerous game of power and manipulation. When Steve returned, I recounted the harrowing encounter, the shock evident in his expression. The realization that my parents had been coerced into participating in such a sinister plot only deepened our sense of unease. But amid the turmoil, one thing became abundantly clear: we couldn't afford to let our guard down. The threats against us were real, and we needed to stay vigilant if we were to protect ourselves and our children from the machinations of those who sought to harm us. The news of Steve's car being found at the bottom of a cliff hit me like a ton of bricks, shattering the fragile semblance of normalcy we had managed to maintain. It was a surreal moment, the words of the police barely registering as they delivered the devastating blow. How could this be happening? Steve, my rock, my partner in this tumultuous journey, couldn't possibly be gone. In the midst of my shock, Lucy stepped in, taking charge of the situation with a calm resolve that belied the turmoil raging within me. Together, we navigated the bureaucratic maze of the police station, confirming the grim news and retrieving the envelope found in Steve's car, a suicide note, the contents of which felt like a cruel twist of fate. The police's conclusion that Steve had taken his own life felt like a gut punch, a betrayal of everything he had stood for. How could he, after all the precautions we had taken, after his steadfast determination to protect our family? The very idea seemed inconceivable, a stark contrast to the vibrant, passionate man I knew and loved. Amid the haze of grief and disbelief, one thought echoed in my mind: he wouldn't do this to himself. There had to be more to the story, a truth buried beneath the surface of this tragic facade. But as the days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and condolences, the truth remained elusive, obscured by a veil of uncertainty and suspicion. The local news buzzed with speculation, but the truth remained elusive, obscured by a veil of uncertainty and suspicion. Was it an accident, as they claimed? Or was there something more sinister at play, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered? As I grappled with the enormity of my loss, one thing became abundantly clear: the journey was far from over. In the wake of Steve's death, a new chapter had begun, one fraught with unanswered questions, unspoken truths, and the relentless pursuit of justice for the man I loved. The days following Steve's death were a blur of grief and confusion, as I struggled to come to terms with the unthinkable loss. My children, innocent and vulnerable, looked to me for answers, their young minds struggling to comprehend why Daddy wasn't coming home. With Lucy's support, I did my best to shield them from the harsh realities of our situation, keeping them close and showering them with love and reassurance. But amidst the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged, a letter from Steve, delivered posthumously, bearing instructions and a key. As I read his words, my heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Here was Steve, reaching out from beyond the grave to guide and protect us, even in his absence. With Lucy by my side, we wasted no time in heeding Steve's instructions, gathering only the essentials and fleeing to the safety of Uncle Ronald's home. The journey was fraught with tension and fear, every passing mile a reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows. But as we arrived at Ronald's doorstep, a wave of relief washed over me. Here, surrounded by family and guarded by Ronald's vigilant security team, we found a temporary sanctuary from the storm raging outside. Ronald and Olivia welcomed us with open arms, their kindness and understanding a balm to my weary soul. I was overwhelmed with gratitude, humbled by their unwavering support in our time of need. As we settled into our new surroundings, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of guilt that weighed heavily on my heart. I had underestimated the depths of the danger we faced, never imagining that Steve's enemies would go so far as to target him directly. But in Ronald's home, surrounded by love and protection, I found a glimmer of hope amid the darkness. With their help, I vowed to uncover the truth behind Steve's death, to seek justice for the man I loved and the family he left behind. As we gathered in Ronald's spacious living room, the weight of our shared grief hung heavy in the air. Olivia, ever the gracious hostess, tended to our needs with warmth and kindness, ensuring the children were comfortable and cared for. But behind the facade of tranquility, a storm of emotions raged within us, threatening to consume us with each passing moment. Ronald's frustration was palpable as he lamented the consequences of allowing certain individuals to roam unchecked within the group. His words struck a chord with me, stirring feelings of guilt and regret for not foreseeing the dangers that lay ahead. But as Olivia voiced her own regrets, a flicker of hope emerged, a plan to ensure the safety and well-being of my children, to shield them from the same fate that befell Steve. It was a proposal born out of love and concern, a gesture of kindness that touched my heart in ways I couldn't fully express. In the days that followed, Steve's body was laid to rest in a private funeral attended by family and close friends. The outpouring of condolences from Steve's colleagues and peers served as a testament to his character and integrity, a reminder of the impact he had on those around him. But amidst the somber atmosphere, a sense of unease lingered, fueled by the presence of Steve's parents, who sat behind us with a blatant disregard for the grief that enveloped us all. After the memorial service, Ronald convened a meeting with the family, in-laws, and management at his house. As we gathered in the sprawling garden, a sense of anticipation hung in the air, mingling with the tension that simmered beneath the surface. And then, amidst the crowd, a figure emerged, Harvey, Lucy's husband. His arrival met with a mixture of relief and curiosity. Clutching a bag tightly, he apologized for his tardiness, his grin masking the secrets he held close. As the day drew to a close, I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey was far from over. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger, but with the support of family and friends, I knew we would weather the storm together, united in our quest for justice and redemption. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Ronald's words hung in the air, his unexpected announcement sending shockwaves through the crowd. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the murmurs of disbelief that rippled through the assembled guests. As Ronald beckoned me and my children forward, a wave of apprehension washed over me, my heart pounding in my chest as I braced myself for what was to come. Beside me, Sam and Mia clung to my hand, their wide eyes betraying their fear and confusion. But as Ronald's intentions became clear, a sense of relief flooded through me, mingling with disbelief at the unexpected turn of events. Could it be true? Had Ronald truly decided to adopt Sam and Mia, to welcome them into his family as his own? The crowd's reaction was mixed, a cacophony of whispers and murmurs filling the air as Ronald's words sank in. Some expressed surprise and approval, while others voiced skepticism and doubt, their eyes darting between Ronald and Marcus, Steve's father. But as the murmurs grew louder, Harvey stepped forward, his voice steady and unwavering as he addressed the crowd. With Ronald's permission, he revealed the truth behind Steve's death, shedding light on the discrepancies and contradictions that had plagued the investigation from the start. As Harvey's words echoed through the garden, Marcus's protests faltered, his face contorted with shock and disbelief. The truth was out, laid bare for all to see, and there was nowhere left to hide. In the midst of the chaos, Ronald stood tall, his resolve unwavering as he faced the scrutiny of his peers and colleagues. It was a moment of reckoning, a turning point in our journey toward justice and redemption. And as the dust settled and the truth emerged, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope stirring within me. Despite the darkness that had clouded our lives, there was a light on the horizon, guiding us forward on the path to healing and closure. Harvey's revelation sent shockwaves through the room, the air thick with tension as the truth unfurled before us. Marcus, once so outspoken, now stood in stunned silence, his face a mask of disbelief and apprehension. As Harvey delved deeper into the investigation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The tampering of Steve's car, the calculated road rage incident, and the long-standing embezzlement scheme, all interconnected, all leading back to Marcus. For years, Marcus had operated under the guise of innocence, his true nature hidden behind a facade of respectability and authority. But now, as the evidence mounted against him, there was nowhere left to hide, no more lies to shield him from the consequences of his actions. The room buzzed with whispers and murmurs as the gravity of the situation sank in. Ronald's expression was unreadable, his gaze fixed on Marcus, with a mixture of disappointment and resignation. And then, as if on cue, the doors swung open, and a wave of uniformed officers flooded into the room. Marcus's protests fell on deaf ears as he was placed under arrest, his once powerful facade crumbling before our eyes. As the commotion subsided and Marcus was led away in handcuffs, a sense of closure washed over me, mingling with the lingering echoes of disbelief and betrayal. The truth had been revealed, justice served, and though the road ahead remained uncertain, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope stirring within me. In the aftermath of the chaos, Ronald approached me, his expression grave yet determined. "I'm truly sorry for everything you've been through, Hannah," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. "But know that you and your children will always have a home here with us." And as I looked into Ronald's eyes, I saw not just sympathy, but a flicker of something else, a sense of resolve, of determination to set things right and ensure that justice prevailed. In that moment, surrounded by uncertainty and upheaval, I knew that we weren't alone, that we had allies, friends, and family who would stand by us no matter what. And with their support, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together, we could overcome anything. Life at Ronald's house has brought a semblance of stability and security to our once tumultuous existence. With each passing day, I find myself settling into a routine of caring for my children and providing support to Ronald and Olivia. The events that unfolded, the revelations that shook our family to its core, are still fresh in my mind. But as time goes by, I'm learning to focus on the present, to cherish the moments of tranquility and solace that we've found in Ronald's home. Olivia dotes on Sam and Mia, her affection a soothing balm for their wounded hearts. And though I can't help but feel a pang of sadness for their loss, I'm grateful that they have her love and care to lean on. Ronald's commitment to his health serves as a reminder of the fragility of life, of the importance of cherishing each day as it comes. His determination to see Sam and Mia through to adulthood fuels my own resolve to make the most of our time together. In this haven of warmth and kindness, I found a sense of belonging that I never thought possible. And though the scars of the past may linger, I'm hopeful for the future, for the days ahead filled with love, laughter, and the simple joys of family life. My name is Hannah Turner, and I'm 24 years old. I work as an illustrator, and I've been happily married to John for nearly a year now. Our relationship has always felt solid, grounded in trust and affection. But lately, things have taken a turn I never expected. It all started with an invitation from my sister, Sally. She's always had a knack for stirring up trouble, and this time was no different. She sent me an invitation to her wedding with John, the very man I'm married to. It was like a cruel joke, a twisted way for her to flaunt what she had won from me. But despite the hurt and anger, I decided to attend, alongside my parents, with a determination to show Sally that her petty games wouldn't break me. The wedding day arrived, and as we walked into the venue, I could sense the tension in the air. My parents, usually so gentle and forgiving, wore expressions of stern disapproval. They were tired of Sally's antics, tired of constantly cleaning up after her messes. And as the ceremony unfolded, it became clear that this was not a celebration but a spectacle of dysfunction. After the wedding fiasco, I returned home feeling drained and defeated. But the real blow came when I noticed a change in John's behavior. He became oddly protective of his phone, carrying it with him everywhere, even at home. I tried to dismiss my suspicions, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, one day, while doing chores around the house, I stumbled upon a notification on my own phone, an email from an unknown account. At first, I brushed it off as spam, but when the messages persisted, they took a sinister turn. The sender claimed to be someone from my past, someone who knew me intimately. The mention of my sister sent chills down my spine. As the messages continued to pour in, I realized that this was no ordinary cyber harassment. The sender knew details about my life that only a select few could know. It was unnerving, to say the least, but what scared me the most was the possibility that Sally was behind it all. Sally had always been jealous of me, resentful of the attention I received from our parents. And now, it seemed she was hell-bent on destroying the one good thing I had, my marriage to John. But why? What could she possibly gain from tearing us apart? With each passing day, the situation escalated, leaving me feeling trapped and vulnerable. My once blissful marriage was now clouded with doubt and suspicion, and I couldn't help but wonder if John was keeping secrets from me. Was our love strong enough to withstand this storm, or were we destined to become casualties of Sally's vindictiveness? With Sally, I felt a surge of anger and frustration. How could she be so callous, so utterly devoid of empathy? It was clear that reasoning with her was futile, that she was determined to inflict as much pain as possible. And in that moment, I made a decision: I would no longer allow Sally to dictate the course of my life. With a newfound sense of resolve, I focused on picking up the pieces of my shattered marriage. It wasn't easy, navigating the complex emotions of betrayal and heartbreak, but I refused to let Sally's cruelty define me. I reached out to friends and family for support, leaning on their strength as I slowly began to rebuild my life. As the days turned into weeks, I found solace in my art, pouring my heartache onto the canvas and finding a semblance of peace in the creative process. And though the scars of betrayal still lingered, I refused to let them consume me. I was determined to emerge from this ordeal stronger, more resilient than ever before. In the end, Sally's vindictiveness only served to highlight the depth of her own insecurity and bitterness. And while I couldn't erase the pain she had caused, I could choose to rise above it, to forge a path forward filled with love, forgiveness, and self-discovery. As I lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by concerned faces, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my own silence pressing down on me. Why hadn't I reached out sooner? Why had I allowed myself to suffer in silence, convinced that I could handle it all on my own? The truth was, I had been grappling with a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, heartbreak, and overwhelming sadness. I had convinced myself that I could bear the burden alone, that I didn't want to burden others with my troubles. But now, as I looked into the eyes of my parents and my dear coworker, I realized how wrong I had been. Tears welled up in my eyes as I recounted the events that had led to my collapse. I spoke of John's betrayal, of Sally's vindictiveness, and of the crushing weight of it all bearing down on me. And with each word that spilled from my lips, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, as if by sharing my pain, I was lightening the load on my shoulders. My parents listened in stunned silence, their expressions a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could Sally have done this to her own sister? How could John have betrayed the love we shared? Their outrage mirrored my own, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope stirring within me. As they wrapped me in their comforting embrace, I realized that I wasn't alone in this struggle, that I had a support system ready and willing to stand by my side, no matter what. And in that moment, I vowed to stop hiding behind a facade of strength and independence, to allow myself to lean on others when I needed it most. Recovery wouldn't be easy, I knew that much. But with the love and support of my family and friends, I was determined to emerge from this ordeal stronger than ever before. Sally and John may have shattered my trust, but they would not break my spirit. And as I closed my eyes, I felt a newfound sense of resilience coursing through my veins, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Natalie read Sally's message, a surge of mixed emotions washed over me: anger, disbelief, and a creeping sense of dread. How could Sally be so brazen, so utterly devoid of empathy? It was clear that she was determined to twist the knife even further, to rub salt in the wound of my broken marriage. Natalie's expression mirrored my own shock and outrage. Without hesitation, she suggested blocking Sally's number, a small but necessary step in reclaiming my peace of mind. And as I watched her deftly navigate my phone settings, a sense of gratitude washed over me. In Natalie, I had found a true friend, someone who would stand by me through thick and thin. But even as we blocked Sally's number, her words lingered in the air like a toxic cloud. John and Sally living together, expecting a child, it was like a punch to the gut, a painful reminder of everything I had lost. And yet, amid the turmoil and heartache, a flicker of something unexpected stirred within me: relief. Relief that I was no longer tied to a man who could betray me so callously, relief that I was free from the toxicity of Sally's manipulation. In that moment, I realized that while Sally and John may have shattered my trust, they could never break my spirit. With Natalie's unwavering support, I began to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The road ahead would be long and arduous, filled with twists and turns, but I knew that as long as I had Natalie by my side, I could weather any storm. As we sat together, savoring the sweetness of my mom's homemade cake, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The wounds inflicted by Sally's betrayal would take time to heal, but I knew that with each passing day, I was one step closer to finding happiness on my own terms. And as I looked to the future, I felt a spark of optimism ignite within me, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found. As I sat there, enveloped in the warmth of my parents' support, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, knowing that I didn't have to face this ordeal alone. And as my mom broached the topic with my dad, I felt a surge of gratitude for their unwavering love and understanding. My dad's reaction surprised me. While I had expected him to be angry and outraged, his calm demeanor and measured response reassured me that everything would be okay. His suggestion to hold off on blocking Sally's number seemed sensible, a small gesture of defiance in the face of her cruelty. In the days that followed, I found solace in the familiar routines of home: my mom's comforting meals, my dad's reassuring presence, and the quiet moments spent reflecting on the challenges I had faced. And though the wounds inflicted by Sally's betrayal would take time to heal, I knew that with my family by my side, I could weather any storm. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, knowing that I was surrounded by love and support. And as I closed my eyes, I whispered a silent prayer for strength, for the courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead, and the wisdom to know that I was not alone. As I took the wedding invitation from my parents' hands, a rush of conflicting emotions washed over me. Sally and John's names printed on the elegant card seemed like a cruel joke, a reminder of the pain they had caused. How could they have the audacity to invite me to their wedding after everything that had happened? My voice caught in my throat as I struggled to process the implications of the invitation. It was clear that Sally and John were oblivious to the hurt they had caused, or perhaps they simply didn't care. But what baffled me even more was the fact that the invitation had been sent to my parents' house, despite my forwarding address being in place. As I examined the invitation more closely, I noticed the date: it was just a few weeks away. The thought of attending Sally and John's wedding filled me with a mixture of dread and anger. How dare they expect me to witness their happiness after they had torn mine apart? My parents exchanged concerned glances, their expressions mirroring my own disbelief. It was clear that they were just as shocked by the invitation as I was, if not more so. And as we sat there in silence, the weight of Sally and John's thoughtless gesture hung heavy in the air. After a moment, my mom broke the silence, her voice trembling with emotion. "Hannah, you don't have to go if you don't want to," she said gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "We'll support whatever decision you make." Her words were like a lifeline in the midst of my turmoil, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this struggle. And as I looked into my parents' eyes, I knew that no matter what I decided, they would be there for me every step of the way. But even as I grappled with the decision of whether to attend Sally and John's wedding, a part of me knew that I couldn't let their thoughtless gesture dictate my happiness. I had come so far in my journey of healing, and I refused to let them drag me back into the darkness. With a newfound sense of determination, I made a decision to RSVP with a firm no and to focus on building a future filled with love, laughter, and new beginnings. And as I sealed the envelope containing my response, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, as if by refusing their invitation, I was finally breaking free from the chains of the past. With Sally and John, she insisted on accompanying my parents to the wedding to provide moral support. I was overwhelmed by Natalie's unwavering loyalty and support, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. I didn't want to burden her with my family drama, especially on such an important day. As we made our way to the wedding venue, tension hung heavy in the air, each passing mile bringing us closer to the inevitable confrontation with Sally and John. But despite the apprehension gnawing at my insides, I found solace in the presence of my parents and Natalie, their unwavering support bolstering my spirits. As we arrived at the venue, I couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu, the sight of the elegant decorations and bustling guests stirring up memories of my own wedding day. But this time, the joy and excitement were replaced by a heavy sense of foreboding, as if we were marching into battle. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation, guests milling about in their finest attire, the air thick with whispers and murmurs. And as I caught sight of Sally and John, standing at the front of the room, a knot formed in the pit of my stomach. But before I could dwell on my apprehension any longer, Natalie took my hand in hers, her grip reassuring and steady. "We've got this," she whispered, her voice filled with determination. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I wasn't facing them alone. As the ceremony began, I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me: anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of betrayal. But amid the chaos of my thoughts, there was also a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are moments of light and resilience. And as I stood there, surrounded by my loved ones, I realized that while Sally and John may have tried to break me, they hadn't succeeded. For in that moment, I was stronger than ever before, a testament to the power of love, friendship, and the unwavering support of those who stood by my side. I had underestimated the depth of Sally and John's delusion, their ability to twist reality to fit their own narrative. As I watched the scene unfold through the screen of my phone, a mixture of disbelief and indignation welled up inside me. How could Sally and John be so brazen, so utterly devoid of empathy? But amid the chaos and confusion, there was a glimmer of satisfaction, a small victory in seeing my parents stand their ground, refusing to be swept aside by Sally's manipulations. And as Sally and John struggled to save face in front of their guests, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. But as the conversation continued, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Despite Sally's attempts to downplay the situation, I knew that the rift between us ran deeper than she was willing to admit. And as I watched John's pale face betray his discomfort, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect facade. And as the reception continued, I found myself grappling with conflicting emotions. Bitterness and resentment mingled with a sense of longing for the warmth and affection I had once shared with John's family. But amid the chaos of my thoughts, there was also a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, there are moments of clarity and strength. And as I ended the video call with Natalie, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for her unwavering support. In her, I had found a true friend, someone who stood by me through thick and thin. And as I reflected on the events of the day, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with courage and resilience, knowing that I was not alone. in solidarity with the men who had been wronged by Sally's deceitful actions. The room fell into stunned silence as the gravity of the situation sunk in, and all eyes turned to Sally, who stood frozen in disbelief. As my mom continued to address the crowd, her voice filled with a mixture of disappointment and determination, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell within me. Despite the chaos and confusion, my parents had refused to stay silent, standing up for what was right even in the face of adversity. And as the events unfolded before my eyes, I realized that this was more than just a wedding, it was a reckoning, a moment of truth and accountability. For too long, Sally had been allowed to manipulate and deceive those around her, but now, the truth was laid bare for all to see. And as Sally stood there, surrounded by the consequences of her actions, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for her. Despite her outward bravado, she was nothing more than a lost soul, trapped in a web of lies of her own making. But amid the chaos and confusion, there was also a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are moments of clarity and redemption. And as I watched the scene unfold, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with courage and resilience, knowing that I was not alone. And as the evening drew to a close, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure wash over me, as if by confronting Sally's deceit head-on, I had finally freed myself from the shadows of the past. And as I looked to the future, I knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, I would face them with strength and determination, ready to embrace whatever came my way. The atmosphere in the reception hall had shifted from chaos to disbelief, with each revelation adding another layer of astonishment to an already tumultuous evening. As my former in-laws delivered their unexpected announcement, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of shock and awe. Here was John, once groomed as the successor to a thriving business, now stripped of that title in front of everyone, including his new bride, Sally. And as John's parents continued to speak, their words carried a weight that seemed to echo throughout the room. They spoke of independence, of making one's own choices, and of living life with integrity, a stark contrast to the deceit and manipulation that had defined Sally and John's relationship. And as I watched John's expression shift from confusion to panic, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, a small victory in the midst of chaos. For too long, Sally and John had wielded their power and influence with impunity, but now, they were facing the consequences of their actions head-on. And as the evening drew to a close, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure wash over me. Despite the chaos and confusion, I had found a sense of peace, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption. And as I looked around the reception hall, I realized that I was not alone. From my parents and Natalie to my former in-laws and even the other guests, I had found a community of support, a reminder that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with courage and resilience, knowing that I was not alone. The chaotic events of the wedding left a lasting impression, not just on Sally and John, but on everyone involved. As the bride and groom made their exit, the applause that followed was subdued, a stark contrast to the jubilant celebrations typically associated with weddings. For Sally and John, it was a bitter end to what was supposed to be a joyous occasion. Their carefully crafted facade had crumbled, revealing the truth behind their relationship, a truth that was now laid bare for all to see. As the dust settled and the last of the guests departed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The events of the day had been tumultuous, but they had also brought to light the strength of the relationships I had with my family and friends. And as I reflected on everything that had transpired, I realized that while the wedding may have ended in disaster, it had also marked a new beginning for me. With the unwavering support of those around me, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that I was not alone. As for Sally and John, their future remained uncertain. The consequences of their actions would undoubtedly follow them, serving as a reminder of the importance of honesty and integrity in all aspects of life. And as I watched the last of the guests disappear into the night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. Despite the chaos and upheaval, there was still hope for a brighter tomorrow, a tomorrow filled with love, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. The aftermath of the wedding debacle brought unexpected but welcome closure to my past with Sally and John. As I welcomed my parents and former in-laws into my home, I realized that despite the hardships, we could still part on good terms. Their tears and words of apology washed away any lingering guilt I had carried. A few days later, when Sally's messages flooded my phone with accusations and blame, I knew it was time to take action. With the evidence she unwittingly provided, I swiftly sought legal counsel and put an end to her attempts to manipulate me. Blocking her was the final step in severing ties with that toxic chapter of my life. John's futile attempts to reach out only solidified my decision to move forward without him. His resignation and Sally's solitary existence were consequences of their actions, and I felt no remorse for the path they had chosen. In contrast, my life was flourishing. A promotion at work and a budding romance brought newfound happiness and stability. With Natalie by my side, we both found solace and companionship in moving on from the past. As my family, friends, and even former in-laws planned a celebratory hot springs trip, I realized that hitting rock bottom had been a blessing in disguise. It had paved the way for a brighter, more fulfilling future, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of better days ahead. I couldn't believe my eyes as I stared at the termination notice sitting ominously in front of me. It was like a punch to the gut, a cold shock that sent my mind spinning. I remembered being warned not to contact during business trips, but this was different. This was urgent, something I couldn't just brush aside. So, I dialed Jack's number, my fingers trembling with anxiety. No answer. I called again and again, desperation mounting with each ring. Simultaneously, I fired off messages, hoping for a response, but there was nothing. It was past noon now, and panic threatened to consume me. Maybe Jack couldn't answer because he was buried in work, but I needed to reach him somehow. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of persistent calling, he picked up. "Hello, Jack," I started, my voice shaky with tension. "Don't you know not to contact me during work hours?" Jack's response was immediate, his tone harsh and unforgiving. He started yelling, no patience or understanding in his voice. "I'm sorry, but it's urgent," I pleaded, trying to make him see reason. "I've received a certified letter from the company." But Jack wasn't willing to listen. He brushed off my concerns, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. It was like talking to a brick wall. Frustration bubbled up inside me as I struggled to make him understand. How could he be so dismissive, especially when our livelihoods were on the line? In the end, I made a decision. I chose to keep silent about the termination notice, knowing that confronting Jack would only lead to more conflict. My name is Sarah Johnson, and I'm 30 years old. As an industrial designer, I'd built my career around shaping the future of products. Once, I was an employee of a major company, but now I'm independent and freelance. At 26, I married Jack, whom I met through a friend's introduction. Even after tying the knot, I continued to work, balancing my career with our growing family. When our son Kyle came along, I made the decision to work from home, a choice that allowed me to be there for him while still pursuing my passion. Returning to work after maternity leave wasn't easy, especially with Jack's dissatisfaction over my reduced salary. He couldn't understand why I insisted on working from home, why I refused to put Kyle in daycare. But for me, it was about more than just money. It was about being there for my son, about finding a balance between my career and my family. Sure, there were challenges along the way. There were times when money was tight, when we struggled to make ends meet. But we made it work, Jack and I, navigating the ups and downs together. After all, when we got married, we made a commitment to each other, a promise to weather whatever storms came our way. So, as I sat there, staring at the termination notice, I knew that whatever happened next, we would face it together. Because in the end, that's what marriage is all about, standing by each other's side, no matter what. Life took a turn when we decided to buy our apartment. Jack, with his meticulous attention to finances, made a compelling argument for investing in property. Despite the initial financial strain, we were assured it would pay off in the long run. We settled for a place conveniently located near a commuting station, hoping it would appreciate over time. For a while, everything was peaceful. That is until I started working from home. Jack's discontent soon surfaced, revealing a deeper dissatisfaction. It seemed he resented the fact that I was the one staying at home, even if financially it made sense. He argued that staying home all the time was detrimental to my health and social life. While there was some truth to his concerns, especially about exercise and isolation, the reality of childcare and postpartum recovery made staying home more practical for me. Bringing up the topic of getting help only seemed to aggravate Jack further. His muttered responses hinted at underlying resentment. He felt it was unfair that I got to enjoy the comfort of our home while he had to endure the pressures of work. His words stung, making me question if he truly understood the sacrifices I was making. As Kyle grew, I found a balance between childcare and work, even venturing into freelancing to contribute financially. However, Jack's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He started coming home late, working weekends, blaming it on the tough economy and the pressure to perform at work. His sarcastic comments about my supposedly easy life at home only added to the strain between us. But the truth was far from easy. I juggled childcare, household chores, and work responsibilities, all from the confines of our home. While Jack saw it as a luxury, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. The tension between us grew, fueled by resentment and misunderstanding. Despite our shared commitment to our family and our home, it felt like we were drifting apart. And as much as I wanted to bridge the gap between us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. I found myself increasingly frustrated with Jack's lack of understanding. Despite my efforts to explain that I wasn't just idling at home, he seemed unable to grasp the reality of my responsibilities. Fed up, I finally confronted him one day, unable to contain my frustration any longer. "Look," I began, my voice tinged with exasperation, "I'm not just playing around. Why can't you understand that I'm paying my share of the mortgage too?" But Jack's response was not what I expected. His face flushed with anger, he interrupted me, his words dripping with resentment. "Oh, is that so?" he retorted bitterly. "I must be such a failure, huh? Can't even get a mortgage on my own with my meager salary." His words cut deep, leaving me speechless. I never meant to undermine his efforts or belittle his struggles. But no matter what I said, Jack only seemed to see things through a negative lens. Frustrated and exhausted, I eventually stopped trying to reason with him altogether. It felt like talking to a brick wall, futile and draining. As our communication dwindled, so did our connection. I began to question the purpose of our relationship, wondering if there was any point in trying to salvage what was left. But Kyle's presence loomed large, a reminder of the ties that bound us together. The thought of depriving him of his father's presence seemed selfish, holding me back from taking any drastic steps. Yet, as time passed, Jack's behavior only worsened. He became increasingly selfish, almost ceasing his financial contributions altogether. What was once a joint effort to maintain our home now fell squarely on my shoulders. It was a heavy burden to bear, but as a designer, I managed to make ends meet, albeit with difficulty. Deep down, I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was more to Jack's actions than met the eye. The thought gnawed at me, planting seeds of doubt and mistrust. Was there another woman? Was he squandering our money on her? The idea seemed absurd, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I toyed with the idea of hiring a detective agency to uncover the truth, but the cost was prohibitive. Besides, without concrete evidence, it felt like a futile endeavor. Then, one day, a certified mail arrived from the company. Jack was away on a business trip, leaving me alone to grapple with its contents. Why would they send something like this while he was away? The timing seemed suspicious, stirring my curiosity and unease. With a sense of trepidation, I tore open the envelope, bracing myself for whatever lay inside. What happened? I asked calmly as he walked through the door. Jack seemed taken aback by my composed demeanor, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy. "Oh, it was just another business trip," he replied hastily, avoiding my gaze. But I could sense the tension in his voice, the unease that lingered beneath the surface. "Is everything all right?" I pressed, unable to shake the feeling that something was amiss. Jack hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Yeah, everything's fine," he muttered, his tone unconvincing. But I wasn't about to let it go. Not this time. I needed answers, and I needed them now. "Jack, we need to talk," I said firmly, my voice brooking no argument. And slowly, reluctantly, he began to unravel. He confessed to the pressures at work, the demands of his clients, the strain on our finances. But there was something else, something he hesitated to reveal. As he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back, that there was more to the story than he was letting on. And then, in a moment of clarity, it hit me. "Who is she, Jack?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. He froze, his eyes widening in shock. And in that moment, I knew. My suspicions had been confirmed. But instead of anger or betrayal, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was it. The moment of truth. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving Jack standing in the doorway, his words lost in the silence of the empty room. As I retreated to the sanctuary of my thoughts, I knew that this was only the beginning. There were still questions to be answered, truths to uncover, and decisions to be made. But for now, I would wait. Patiently. Quietly. And when the time was right, I would act. "Jack," I called out as he was about to leave for work. He turned to look at me, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "I just wanted to say." "I forgive you," I said, forcing a smile onto my lips. Jack's expression softened, confusion flickering across his features. "Forgive me? For what?" "For everything," I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil raging inside me. "Let's just put it all behind us and move on." And with that, I watched as Jack left the house, a weight lifting off my shoulders. But inside, I was seething with anger and determination. As soon as he was gone, I delved back into the data I had gathered from his phone. Kate. That was her name, or at least the name she went by in Jack's contacts. With a sense of grim satisfaction, I began to compile the evidence I would need to confront her. But I didn't stop there. No, I had a plan, a carefully calculated scheme to exact my revenge. And it all started with a simple message. "Hey Kate," I typed, my fingers trembling with anticipation. "It's Jack's wife. We need to talk." And as I hit send, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. This was just the beginning. There would be no turning back now. I'd caught him off guard, his expression a mix of shock and confusion as he stared at me, wide-eyed. But there was something else there too, something darker lurking beneath the surface. What are you doing here?" Jack stammered, his voice wavering with uncertainty. I ignored his question, my gaze fixed on Kate as she slowly regained her composure, clutching her head in pain. "I hope you enjoyed your little rendezvous," I said, my tone dripping with disdain. "Because it's over now." I watched as realization dawned on their faces, their expressions shifting from surprise to fear. But I wasn't done yet. No, I had one final card to play. "I've hired professionals to gather all the evidence I need," I continued, my voice cold and calculated. "But I wanted to personally witness your betrayal." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Jack's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the consequences of his actions. "And now," I said, my voice rising with anger, "it's time for you to leave." With a sense of satisfaction, I watched as they scrambled to gather their things, their movements frantic and desperate. And as they hurried out the door, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. But the ordeal was far from over. There were still legal proceedings to navigate, divorce papers to sign, and the delicate matter of custody to consider. But for now, in this moment of triumph, I allowed myself to revel in the sweet taste of revenge. As I closed the door behind them, a weight lifted off my shoulders, leaving behind a sense of clarity and purpose. And as I looked to the future, I knew that I would emerge from this ordeal stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. As my guests entered the dining room, Jack and Kate exchanged nervous glances, their unease palpable in the air. The professionals wasted no time, taking their seats at the table with an air of authority. "Now," I began, addressing the professionals, "I need your assistance in gathering evidence of their affair. I want every detail documented, every interaction recorded." The professionals nodded in understanding, pulling out their devices and preparing to do their work. Jack and Kate squirmed uncomfortably in their seats, realizing the gravity of the situation they found themselves in. As the professionals began their investigation, I turned my attention back to Jack and Kate, my gaze cold and unforgiving. "You've both made a grave mistake," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "But perhaps there's still a chance for redemption." I outlined my terms, making it clear that their cooperation would determine the severity of the consequences they faced. Jack and Kate nodded eagerly, desperate to salvage whatever they could from the wreckage of their affair. But even as they pledged their cooperation, I knew that the damage had already been done. There would be no turning back from this betrayal, no easy path to forgiveness. As the professionals worked tirelessly to gather evidence, I watched with a sense of detachment, the reality of the situation sinking in with each passing moment. This was the end of the road for Jack and Kate, the final chapter in a story of deceit and betrayal. And as I sat in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of my shattered marriage, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. But one thing was certain, I would emerge from this ordeal stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. Was indeed 2 years ago. She recounted how Jack had painted a picture of a troubled marriage, offering her solace and companionship in her time of need. But now, faced with the reality of their betrayal laid bare before them, there was no room for excuses or justifications. As the truth unfolded, I listened in silence, my heart heavy with the weight of their betrayal. But amidst the pain and anger, there was also a sense of clarity. This was the closure I needed, the final nail in the coffin of our doomed marriage. With a sense of finality, I turned to the professionals, instructing them to document every detail of Jack and Kate's confession. This would be the evidence I needed to move forward with divorce proceedings, to sever the ties that bound us together. As they left the room, Jack and Kate remained seated, their heads bowed in shame. The air was heavy with tension, the silence suffocating in its intensity. But amidst the chaos and heartache, there was also a glimmer of hope. This was not the end, but a new beginning. And as I stood up to leave, a sense of empowerment washed over me. I may have been betrayed, but I would not be defeated. I would emerge from this ordeal stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. For in the end, it was not the betrayal that defined me, but how I chose to rise above it. And as I walked away from the wreckage of my marriage, I knew that I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, with courage, resilience, and grace. I remained silent about the rest, feeling that pressing further would be futile. Instead, I made arrangements to speak with both sets of parents, Jack's and Kate's. The detectives were thanked and sent away, and Kate was shown out of the house. Turning to Jack, I tersely suggested he leave as well, recommending he find accommodation elsewhere. Later, I convened a meeting with our parents. My in-laws were visibly shaken, offering profuse apologies, while my own parents sat with a silent, simmering anger. Displaying all the evidence, including the damning conversation from the day of the discovery, I made my intentions clear. I wanted a divorce, custody of Kyle, child support, and damages. Jack protested the amount demanded, but I remained resolute. The truth of his deceit over 2 years, coupled with his financial negligence, left me unmoved. My in-laws were shocked, hearing these details for the first time. Despite a moment where my father-in-law was visibly angry, I intervened, not wanting to witness violence. With promises from my in-laws to cover the damages and child support, I turned my attention to the apartment. Opting to take payment for my share of the mortgage up until that point, I left the remainder to Jack. Living in a tainted home was not an option for me. Selling the property would likely result in a loss, but it was a necessary step given Jack's inability to keep up with payments. Learning the reason for Jack's termination only solidified my resolve. His reckless actions, driven by jealousy and a desire to outdo me, had led to significant losses for his clients. Despite his misguided attempts to rectify the situation, he only made matters worse, oblivious to the consequences of his actions. In the aftermath, I began the process of rebuilding my life, determined to move forward without Jack. It was a challenging journey ahead, but I was ready to face it with strength and resilience, knowing that I had emerged from the turmoil of my marriage stronger than ever before. I couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration and disbelief as Jack attempted to shift the blame onto me. His excuses sounded feeble and hollow, especially in the face of his own deceit. It was clear that he was unwilling to take responsibility for his actions, instead choosing to deflect and point fingers. His accusations stung deeply. To insinuate that my focus on our newborn son was somehow to blame for his infidelity felt like a cruel twist of reality. The demands he made, urging me to return to office work and shoulder the burden of commuting, only added insult to injury. As he continued to lay out his grievances, I couldn't help but feel a sense of weariness wash over me. None of his words rang true, and I found myself growing tired of the endless excuses and justifications. Even as my in-laws broke down in tears, I remained steadfast in my resolve. The wounds inflicted by Jack's betrayal ran deep, and no amount of monetary compensation could erase the pain. However, I understood the importance of reaching a resolution, if only to bring some semblance of closure to this tumultuous chapter of my life. Accepting the agreed-upon damages and child support felt like a compromise, a way to ensure that Kyle's well-being would be safeguarded. And while I couldn't forgive Jack and Kate for their actions, I chose to set aside my anger and bitterness, at least for the time being. As Kate stood before me, her demeanor markedly different from the drunken woman I had encountered before, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of empathy. It was clear that she, too, had been swept up in Jack's deception, a victim of his lies and manipulation. In the end, I knew that I had to move forward, to focus on rebuilding my life and providing a stable, loving environment for Kyle. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and obstacles, but I was determined to face it with strength and resilience. Kate's story revealed a journey of naivety and misplaced trust, yet her willingness to acknowledge her faults and take responsibility for her actions spoke volumes about her character. She had been swept up in Jack's charm and promises, only to realize too late the true nature of their relationship. Her decision to return to her roots and start afresh showed a strength and resilience that was admirable. As for Jack, his downfall was inevitable. His reckless behavior and disregard for the consequences of his actions led to his ultimate undoing. While I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for my in-laws, who were unwittingly dragged into his mess, his punishment was just. Returning to my parents' home with Kyle marked a new chapter in my life. Despite the challenges I had faced, my career was thriving, and my son's growth brought me solace and joy. I was determined to provide him with a stable and loving environment, free from the chaos and deceit that had plagued my marriage. As I looked towards the future, I held on to the hope that true happiness awaited me. Like Kate, I refused